All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. You are joining the FY25 How to Apply information session regarding our presenting and touring program. So we'll be covering the touring grant and the touring roster today. And if I have not met you, my name is Emily Sollenberger. I'm a program director at the State Arts Council and joined here by Laura Weiss, my co-program director for the program. We will both be covering some slides today, so you'll hear both of our voices throughout today's presentation. Before we get started, if you haven't joined a State Arts Council public session like this, you'll know that, well, just FYI, we cover some reference shots of our Google Meet and go into some grounding slides. So if you are not familiar with Google Meet, you'll see on your screen a reference shot of generally the tools that you have to use. So being mindful that we do ask that you stay on mute today. So you'll see that microphone on and off button. You'll also see the camera button as well. So you are welcome to stay on camera or off, whatever is most comfortable for you. You will also see closed captioning as an option. So there's two C's with a box around it for closed captioning. Feel free to utilize those reactions. So if you want to give a thumbs up or a heart, that is totally fine with us. Be mindful of that share screen, which is a square with an arrow in it. I'm sharing my screen today, so don't click that. Later on in the presentation, we'll hopefully have some time for some Q&A. So if you want to utilize the raise hand feature, it looks like this, a hand button, that'll raise your hand to let us know that you have a question. But do save your questions till the end because we might cover those in the slides that we'll be going over today. Additionally, there is a chat feature for Google Meet. It is towards the bottom right of your screen. It's a box with 3 lines in it. So Laura and I will probably drop some links into that chat box today. If you have any questions or comments about today's program, feel free to drop those questions in the chat and we will try to answer them, or we'll answer them at the end of today's presentation. Just note that that chat is a public chat feature, so everybody in the meeting can see it. There is no private message option for Google Meet. So just be mindful whenever you're putting something in that chat box that everybody can see it. Okay, and then moving into our grounding slides, I'm going to read the next few aloud for accessibility purposes to ground us in the space today. The first is our land acknowledgement statement, and that is, we acknowledge the lands and waters now known as Maryland are the home of its first peoples, the Accohonic Indian Tribe, Assateague Peoples Tribe, Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, Choptico Band of Indians, Lenape Tribe, Nanticoke Tribe, Nasu-Wawash Band of Indians, Piscataway Conoy Tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, Pocomoke Indian Nation, Susquehannock Indians, Yakagani River Band of Shawnee, and tribes in the Chesapeake watershed who have seemingly vanished since the coming of colonialism. We acknowledge that this land is now home to other tribal peoples living here in diaspora. We acknowledge the forced removal of many from the lands and waterways that nurtured them as kin. We acknowledge the degradation that continues to be wrought on the land and waters in pursuit of resources. We acknowledge the right of the land and waterways to heal so that they can continue to provide food and medicine for all. We acknowledge that it is our collective obligation to pursue policies and practices that respect the land and waters so that our reciprocal relationship with them can be fully restored. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about our land acknowledgement statement and the development of this statement, you can find more information on msac.org. Next is our equity and justice statement, and that is the arts celebrate our state's diversity, collect our shared humanity, and transform individuals and communities. The Maryland State Arts Council and its supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organizations and across communities of our state. MSAC and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination regardless of race, religious creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. Next is our vision. The Maryland State Arts Council plays an essential role ensuring every person has access to the transformative power of the arts. And we do this through our mission, which advances the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression, diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts is a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all the people of Maryland. And on the screen here, you will see 5 goals that are bolded here, and these are in direct connection to our current strategic plan that was developed in 2019. The State Arts Council is currently in the process of developing a new strategic plan, so we're really looking forward to rolling that out in the upcoming months, probably closer to the fall end of the calendar year. But for now, we're sticking with these goals, which are still very much relevant. So the goals that we are looking at right now are to increase participation. Goal 2 is to provide intentional support. Goal 3 is to build capacity. Goal 4 is leverage connections. Goal 5 is to bolster Maryland arts. And finally, we just have some creative meeting actions here that we ask that you keep in mind as we are in the space with other folks. So we ask that you celebrate being in the space with other creative people, engage with everyone's presence as a gift, acknowledge that together we know a lot, enter the conversation with curiosity and inquiry, share your idea and trust that it will be heard, use I statements, focus your language on the task at hand, hold one another accountable with care, apply the idea yes and I hear your idea and I'm going to add to it, and balance speaking and listening. This next slide is around the professional development offerings that we have at the State Arts Council. Information sessions just like this are part of that scope of professional development that we offer. We also offer topic-specific sessions throughout the year. So you might see things along the lines of financial management or legal advice from our friends at Maryland Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts, along with other topics that we hear about throughout the year. We also have been hosting regional office hours in person over the past year. So you might see us in an area near you if you have not already seen us at another regional office hour. We were in Annapolis a week or so ago. We'll be in Carroll County coming up, and we'll also be having office hours in person on Thursday and Friday this week at the Maryland Arts Summit. And the Maryland Arts Summit is a 2-day conference for the art sector that is run by Maryland Citizens for the Arts. So I believe registration is closed. So if you have not got your registration in but interested, you can also go to the Maryland Arts Summit resources on the Maryland Citizens for the Arts. And Laura just dropped that link in the chat. She also dropped, I think, the link to our Eventbrite page for the State Arts Council, upcoming information sessions, and other professional development. This next is just other ways to get involved with the State Arts Council. We do rely on our constituents across the state to be involved as panelists, to review and score applications, editors to give us input on program policies when we make specific changes to our programs, along with jurors and other opportunities throughout the year. In particular, for panelists, we do rely on panelists for nearly every, I should say, grant program for the State Arts Council. So part of that panelist responsibilities would be getting training and support from the program staff, reviewing those applications, attending panel meetings if that's the case for that program. And another important piece is that you would be compensated for your time and service for that. So I believe Laura dropped the link for that page as well. So take a look. I believe there's an opportunity for our arts and education program right now. So that is an open call that you are welcome to apply for. Okay, moving forward into why we're here today and around the agenda for the presenting and touring program, we'll go review the program itself and specifically go into the touring roster in that application. Then we'll move into the touring grant application, the monthly review process, Smart Simple, which is our grants platform, and hopefully have a little bit of time at the end for questions and answers. So I'm going to just go into a quick overview of the program itself. So the purpose of the presenting and touring program is really to support a network of artists across the state of Maryland. So that includes professional artists and performing arts organizations. And there are two different types of opportunities under the presenting and touring umbrella. And that includes the touring grant, which is open to organizations to apply for funding. And then it also includes the touring roster, which is for our artists and groups to apply for that particular roster. And the Maryland Touring Grant that our organizations can apply for supports the presentation of artists on the touring roster. So essentially, our presenters can apply for funding to hire the artists. So I'm going to move into the roster first, and then I'm going to hand it over to Laura to go through the grant program in a bit. So again, the Maryland Touring Roster is a listing of touring artists from across the state of Maryland. I think right now we're close to 120 some artists and groups and ensembles on the roster now. So the roster can include both solo performers and performing companies or groups. So that will include more than one performer that can join the roster. All types of performers are welcome to apply to be on the roster. We also, at the State Arts Council, do our best to promote the roster and funding opportunities to the presenters so we can make those collaborations happen. Additionally, you can receive bookings and artist fee while working collaboratively with those presenters who can then receive the touring grant to cover those expenses and artist fees. Additionally, the roster applications are reviewed monthly. You're eligible to apply on a rolling deadline that happens between July 1st and April 30th. And both, Laura will go into this a little bit more, but both the roster and the touring grant are on the same schedule. So both are open from July 1st to April 30th of next year, and applications are reviewed on that monthly cycle. So who can apply in more detail here on the roster? You must be a Maryland resident and at least 18 years of age or older. If it's a group, all members must be 18 years of age or older, and at least 50% of the Maryland residents, or 50% of the group must be Maryland residents. So if you're a group of, say, 6, at least 3 of the members must be Maryland residents. If you are a group, the company's primary place of business must be located in Maryland. Another opportunity is connected to our college and university-based performers. So if you are a group connected to a college or a university, that group must perform regularly off campus for professional fees. If the company or the group has its own nonprofit status, the makeup of that performing ensemble must meet the eligibility criteria outlined for the performing companies and groups. And additionally, we review all the eligibility requirements in the program guidelines on the State Arts Council website. So you'll find a full listing of the eligibility criteria in the guidelines, and those will be posted in the next week or so, hopefully on the website for FY25. Additionally, to the age and the residency requirements that we spoke about, you also must be able to demonstrate that you have a successful history of professional touring engagements as part of the application. So some of those things to keep in mind: that a tour is a public performance in a venue or venues that are not typically or regularly scheduled by the performer and within the state of Maryland. So this includes both one-time performances that might exist or longer multi-engagement tours, but again, happening in the state of Maryland. And again, tour does not equal like a national or international travel in this context. We're really focusing on connecting our Maryland artists and ensembles with Maryland presenters. So we are looking to uplift those performances that are happening here in our state. So the roster application includes 5 narrative questions along with a section for supplemental materials. So the 5 narrative questions are really focused around the artistic goals of that artist or the group, and how touring fits within those goals. The next question is around the touring management and programming arrangements that you have or may need for the touring engagement. We asked for your basic space requirements. Additionally, there's another part that's optional and not scored, but if you're somebody who provides educational opportunities or residency offerings in addition to touring, you're welcome to include that information in the application as well. And then the supplemental materials include 3 work samples, a listing of touring engagements, an example kind of blank contract, and then example of promotional materials. And all of that just lends itself to how it connects to your touring goals and your history of touring across the state or even beyond that. But the work samples should be a pretty clear examples of you in action and performing. So that could include video samples, audio samples, perhaps you have YouTube links or Vimeo links. Those are really helpful for our panelists to see and make sure that you are indeed the folks that are presenting in those work samples. Additionally, the full application and scoring rubric can be found on the program pages. So there's a specific program page for the roster, and you can find that on that page. We're just in the process of switching all of our materials from FY24 to FY25. So you'll see all of those things being updated over the next week or so. And then just a couple of frequently asked questions when we're talking to folks interested in the touring roster that we feel might be helpful as you're thinking about if you're an artist that's looking to join the roster. So one thing we hear a lot is, I've been accepted onto the touring roster. When do I receive my grant? Well, the touring roster itself is not a grant program or a funding opportunity. It works in conjunction with that touring grant that Laura's going to go into further, which is awarded to an organization or a venue to present you or your group at that location. So essentially you'd be working with that venue to hire you, and then the grant would then pay for your artist fees or any associated expenses. Another we hear is, can being on the touring roster help with national or international bookings? The presenting and touring program is focused really on Maryland-based presentations of Maryland-based artists. So there isn't really an answer there other than you might be able to use some examples for national or international bookings, but that's not the focus of this particular program. Another that we hear is, I don't have a professional, quote unquote, professional video or work sample to share. Is that okay? And yes, absolutely, that's okay. Panelists are not scoring the quality of a video for the work sample. They're really looking at your work as a performer. So a professional reel or a video is not required as part of the application. We just want to make sure that you are able to be seen and or heard really clearly in that particular work sample. Additionally, one we hear is, how do I connect with potential presenters? So Laura and I are currently working to increase those opportunities for presenters to connect with touring artists. So in 2022 and 23, we offered a virtual touring showcase, and we're planning to do this again very soon, so more to come. Hopefully we'll see something in the fall where we can connect our roster artists to presenters. So that's a good way of really looking to see what's across the state and who's represented on the roster. Okay, I think that's the basic overview for the roster, and I'm going to ask Laura to go in more detail about the grant itself.
Great, thanks so much, Emily. So the touring grant is the other arm, if you will, of the presenting and touring program. So that touring grant, again, that is going to be supporting an organization's presentation of an artist or artists from the touring roster. It's really meant to help subsidize the presentation of the performers that are featured on the touring roster. The application, it can be for multiple performers or even multiple events. So that's just something to really think about when you're going to apply. A couple bullet points down, you can see that an organization can only receive one touring grant per fiscal year. So when you're strategizing and looking at your season ahead, just think about that, because you're only able to get one grant, but that grant can support multiple performers and multiple presentations if you need that. The total grant is available for up to $5,000. Those grant applications, just like Emily was saying with the touring roster application, the grant applications are accepted on a rolling basis and they are reviewed monthly. So you can apply anytime between the beginning of July, when they reopen for FY25 funding, all the way through until April 30th of 2025. Another thing that's a little bit unique actually in the touring grant world is that it can actually support activities that happen a little bit longer than the fiscal year. So it actually can go, it can support activities that take place between July 1st of 2024 all the way until December 31st of 2025. So it's actually kind of a fiscal year and a half. And that's because touring, sometimes that has much longer lead time, with having to make all of the arrangements for artists to come to your venue and such. So it has a little bit more time that you are able to use for an FY25 grant, can go all the way through presentations happening until December 31st, 2025. Who can apply to the touring grant? So the Maryland Touring Grant, it is available to nonprofit organizations or programs only. It's not something that independent artists can apply to. So again, this is coming from the presenter side of things. The artists are not applying to the grant. The organizations would need to be a 501c3 nonprofit organization. They could also be a unit of government, or a college or university or a school. And it's important to point out that this is not necessarily limited to arts organizations. It's kind of the beauty of the touring grant is that other kinds of organizations can bring artists to their locations to perform. So we often see things like libraries, rec centers, senior centers, things like that, that might not necessarily be an arts organization, but has arts programming to bring artists to their space to perform for their audiences. So that's just kind of another unique thing about the touring grant. This is not something that is available to for-profit venues, though. So if you are a for-profit venue, this would not be available for you. The proposed presentation does need to be open to the public, and it does need to take place in Maryland for it to be eligible. Additionally, when you're looking at the application itself, the applicant, which again, in this case, that would be the presenting organization, they would complete the contact information and the organizational information in the application itself, which is in Smart Simple, our grants platform. The applicant would then select each roster artist that they want to apply for that funding for. And again, that can be one artist, that could be 3 artists, that could be 5 artists. It could be however many artists you need to select to have supported through the grant. But however many you select, there would be a separate narrative completed for each of the artists. So that's important to point out. If you are writing an application for 3 artists, you're going to have 3 separate narratives that each one is going to address the particular artist that you've selected. Again, the applicants are able to select as many artists within that full application, and the total grant amount can be up to $5,000. Additionally, you're going to be asked for a couple of attachments as part of the application, including a completed W-9, and that's just so if you are awarded the grant, we can process your payment for you. And we also ask for your IRS letter of tax determination. So that's just showing that you are a nonprofit or you fit into one of these other eligible categories. And the last thing in the application is that you are asked for an electronic signature. And this is simply typing in your name at the end of the application, just showing, that you have read the application and that you have met all of the eligibility requirements and everything you are submitting is true. There's also an electronic signature for the artists as well. So that is something that you would need to be coordinating with your selected roster artists so you can get their signature on it as well. The touring grant application, again, it's a fairly brief application. It's only 5 narrative questions, plus then some questions about the booking information, such as the fees and the dates that the touring roster artists will be performing on. The questions really are focused on, the first one is looking at the collaboration between the touring artist and the organization. The second is looking at the public value of the presentation. The third is looking at emotional or sensory experience of that presented artist. The fourth is looking at the way that non-dominant norms, values, or narratives are seen through the presentation of the selected artist. And finally, we're looking at the engagement of audiences not currently served. And each of those have just brief narrative sections that you're able to fill out. And while it is being submitted by the organization, the hope is that you are collaborating with your selected touring artist so that you're able to talk through these questions, and have the touring artist's input as well on these narrative responses. So there is that hope of collaboration between the touring artist and organization. As Emily said earlier, we are in the process of moving everything to our FY25 applications and rubrics right now. So that full application and scoring rubric will be able to, you'll be able to access that on msac.org. In just a few weeks. It should be there by the beginning of July at the latest. So just kind of a summary here, the touring grants, again, they're available for up to $5,000 total. One grant can support multiple artists. And again, each organization is eligible for 1 touring grant per fiscal year. So plan accordingly when you're looking at your schedule and thinking about what you want to apply for. If you know you're going to have multiple presentations in 1 fiscal year, really think about submitting that application to support multiple artists and multiple engagements. It's also important to point out that like our creativity grants and our professional development opportunity grants, touring grants are what we an all or none grant. And what that means is that if you are approved for funding, then you're going to receive whatever the requested amount is. So if you ask for $5,000 and you are approved, you're going to get $5,000. We don't offer a percentage or a portion of the requested amount. So again, really think about that when you're formulating the request that you're putting into the application. A couple of frequently asked questions that we get specifically about the touring grant. We often get the question of, can a touring grant support a touring roster member performing at my child's school? The performance supported by a touring grant has to be open to the public. So if something is happening during the school day specific for, a certain grade or just a certain school, it's probably not going to be considered eligible for a touring grant. It would need to be open to the public at large. We do have arts and education funding, which that could potentially support something like that. So that would be a conversation with us and with our colleague Lizzie, who oversees the arts and education programming. Another question that we get often, which I sort of hit on already, is can a non-arts nonprofit apply for a touring grant? And yep, you absolutely can. The nonprofit doesn't necessarily have to be an arts organization to apply for a touring grant. This would be considered what we call an arts program if a non-arts-based organization is applying. So like I said before, we do see examples frequently from organizations and venues like libraries and community centers. Sometimes we see neighborhood or community associations, things like that, that might not be arts-based as an organization, but they have an arts program. So if you fall into that, definitely consider applying. Another question we often see is, my organization receives GFO or grants for organizations or creativity general operating support from MSAC. Can I apply for a touring grant? And yes, you can. It is possible to get both general operating support and a touring grant in the same fiscal year. They're two totally separate programs with different goals, so you can apply for both of them. Another question we often see is, are there any matching requirements for the touring grant? And this one is somewhat new, but no, there are no matching requirements for the touring grant. We used to have a match that was required, but since the spring of 2020 and the onset of the pandemic, we have eliminated that previous matching requirement that was a part of the touring grant. It's been permanently eliminated as of FY24, so you don't need to worry about that part. Finally, again, we've hit on this multiple times, but it's something that sometimes people miss, so we like to really reiterate this one. Can my organization apply for multiple touring artists for different events throughout the fiscal year? And yes, you can. Just make sure everything is in the context of one application. So you're only eligible for funding once in the fiscal year, but it can cover multiple artists for multiple events, totaling up to $5,000. So the monthly application process, just to walk through what the schedule looks like for that. Again, all the applications, both for the touring roster and the touring grant, they are accepted on a rolling basis. So that means you can apply anytime you want. Once the application opens in early July, all the way through until the end of April 2025. And they're reviewed and awarded monthly. How we do that is we batch the applications received in 1 month, and they are all then reviewed in the following month. So as an example, we would take all of the applications received in, say, the month of August. So that would be any applications received from August 1st through August 31st. All of those would be batched together, and they would be reviewed in September. And then the notifications for those would then be sent out by early October. And then that just repeats. So everything received in September would then be reviewed in October, with notifications coming out by early November, all the way through until spring of 2025. All of our applications are reviewed by panelists. Emily talked about our call for panelists earlier. So everything is sent to panelists to review. The staff do not score or review your applications. So the program has a group of panelists that will participate in those reviews for the entire fiscal year. In a typical month, what we do is we select 5 of the 10 panelists that will then review those applications. And they are reviewing both the roster applications and the grant applications. So they see a little bit of everything, and we make sure that we mix up those panelists every month. So that way we're getting different groups of people and different points of view looking at the each application review period. So what happens if you get a touring grant? Well, first off, congratulations. That's great news that you are being supported with a touring grant. Again, you're just eligible for one per fiscal year. So once you are awarded an FY25 touring grant, then you would not be eligible for another one until FY26. You'll be notified about the touring grant, and this would be true for the touring roster as well. All of our notifications come through Smart Simple. So you would get an automated email that lets you know that you have received the touring grant. If you're receiving that touring grant, you would then also receive information on how to sign and return a grant agreement form via Smart Simple. So you do need to sign that agreement. If you are receiving roster notification, there's no agreement as part of that, so you don't have to worry about this step. But you would then sign your grant agreement if you're receiving a touring grant. That would then come back to us, and a staff member would countersign that, so that way you have a fully executed grant agreement form. Once those steps are completed, Then we go into the payment processing, and that typically takes about 6 to 8 weeks from the date of the receipt of the fully executed grant agreement. It takes 6 to 8 weeks to receive payment. And that's an important thing to point out, just when you're thinking about the timing of when to apply. It's not something that we cut a check, the next day and we give it to you. It does, all of that processing takes place outside of our offices. So it does take some time. So think about that. Just take that into consideration when you're looking at your timeline and your schedule. If you are awarded a touring grant, you would have a final report that is due, that's associated with your grant. So all of the FY25 touring grant recipients must complete and submit their final report by December 31st of 2025. And again, this is something that would be in Smart Simple. As soon as you have that fully executed grant agreement form, this would populate within your Smart Simple dashboard. So all of that information would be available to you pretty early on, so you can take a look at the information that you would need for your final report. It's a pretty brief report, but it's good to keep an eye on just exactly the information that we will need down the road. It's also important to note that the grantee agrees to spend or obligate all funds by their assigned final report date. So that means that the activities need to be completed and you need to spend all of the funding by December 31st, 2025. If you're not awarded or if you're not approved for the touring roster, we absolutely encourage you to try again. We do have, in the touring grant, it is limited funds. So, we're only able to award a certain amount of applications every month. So we absolutely encourage you to try again if you are not awarded or approved on that first go round. We're here to help you with that process. So if you are declined, we do encourage you to request feedback on your application. And you can do that by, once you receive that declined notification, there will be within that email a link that you can click on and fill out a brief form that's requesting that feedback. And that will go to me or to Emily. And we're able to then go into to the review of your application. We'll pull comments from the panelists that might help strengthen your application in the future. So we do really encourage that. You don't have to wait any sort of period to reapply. You could reapply the next month if you want. Or you could take a little bit of time to, kind of finesse your application and work with us on making sure that you have a really solid application moving forward. We do really encourage you to apply for funding early whenever possible. And again, that really is thinking about, just looking at that payment process, and it does take 6 to 8 weeks to receive payment. If you're applying for something that is coming up really soon, then there's going to be a really tight turnaround. So we do encourage really thinking about applying as early as possible. That also just encourages, in case you are not approved for funding, it does then give you that ability to perhaps reapply before your event occurs. So again, just think about that in terms of your timeline and your scheduling. Additionally, we're really available to help you with your applications the whole way through. So we are available to review draft applications if that is helpful for you. You can feel free to reach out to us to read a draft, and then we can provide some feedback for you before you click submit. We do encourage you, again, this is something that, we have long lists of requests. So make sure that you're planning for, give us a couple of weeks to be able to process that feedback. Sometimes we can turn it around really quickly, but sometimes it can take 4 or 6 weeks to get to you, to get to that feedback. But feel free to reach out to us, and we can definitely take a read through. We usually see this more for the touring grant side of things, but we're happy to look at roster applications as well to offer any kind of feedback. All right, so just to give a quick rundown of the grants platform in case you are not familiar with it. This our grants platform is called Smart Simple, and you can get to it by going to marylandarts.smartsimple.com. You will need to be registered in this system if you are going to apply to any of our programs. So you will need to set up a profile if you don't have one already. It's pretty easy to do so. You would just need to go to marylandarts.smartsimple.com. You can click the little blue register button in the lower left-hand corner if you are new to the system, and it will basically walk you through how to set up a profile. You would need to select if you're an organization or an independent artist, and then it will just ask you for some basic contact information to enter in there. So once you're signed up, you can log in by putting in your email address and your password and click log in. And that's going to bring you to your dashboard, which would look something like this. You would want to navigate to the section that says My Applications, and you're going to look for the Opportunities section. It'll be the first one in this list. There might be a different number above it, just depending on what is available to you and what's open at the time. So the screenshot has 2, but it might be a different number than that. So you would click on Opportunities, and then depending on what you are applying for, you're going to either look for the Presenting and Touring Roster application or the Presenting and Touring application itself, which is going to be the Touring Grant. Either one, whichever you're picking, you would hit the little Apply Now button that corresponds to that application type, and then that's going to open up your application. Once you get to this point, you're going to want to click the Save Draft button to begin your application. You do need to do this step to basically start the application, to activate it, so make sure you do click Save Draft to begin with. And once you do that, the system is going to pretty much walk you through the application itself. It will bring you, from to each of the narrative sections that you need to fill out, and it will just kind of go from there. We do encourage you periodically to click the Save Draft button. It is not a system that auto saves, so that is something important to point out. Just so you don't lose anything, we definitely recommend every now and then just click on Save Draft to make sure that you don't lose anything. Once you've worked your way through the application, and once you're good to go, you're feeling good about your application and you're ready to submit, you'll then just click the blue Submit button, and that will lock everything in, and that's going to send it to us so we can then send it to the panelists for review. And that is pretty much it. I think that brings us to our last slide. And I think we have a couple of minutes here. Our email addresses are here, our contact information, and we're always happy to answer questions or talk through anything that you might be curious about with these particular applications. So you can feel free to reach out to us anytime. And we're happy to either chat via email, we can set up a meeting, we can call you, anything you want to talk more. But I will go ahead and stop here. We have about 15 minutes actually still left. So if there are any questions, we are happy to take them if you want to raise your hand. Or Emily, if there's anything in the chat to bring up.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick break in talking too, Laura. Thanks for going through the end of that. There have been a few questions in the chat that we've both been answering along the way. So just in case you have not been looking at that, there's been a couple of questions around the application period time and when to apply. So just for clarity, the application for both the roster and the grant will open July 1st, so just in a couple of weeks, and will be open on a rolling basis through April 30th of 2025. So that's our FY25 cycle. Again, if you apply in July, so the very first month, the review period would be in August, and you would hear by the first week of September. So just want to, I think Leah or Leah, however you say that, will be, I think that answers your last question there. And yes, the application will open in Smart Simple on July 1st. So if you're looking for it today or even next week, you're not going to see it there. It will not open in Smart Simple until we actually open it up for submissions. Let's see. There was a couple other things that popular. I just want to uplift. There was a question around if you can charge a fee. So if you're a presenter hiring an artist, asking if you can charge a fee for that presentation, you absolutely can charge a fee. You do not have to offer free programming just because you get this grant. So just keep that in consideration. And a second part of that question was around a fundraiser. We get that question somewhat frequently too. So just want to clarify that as long as the fundraiser is open to the public to attend, it tends to be okay. But if you are if you're going to plan, you cannot re-grant the funds out or provide the touring grant funds to another organization. It really has to stay in the context of the presentation of the artist. So if you do have that come up in some way, a fundraiser, just talk to Laura and I before you go ahead and submit, so we can just make sure it's okay and eligible, because there are some nuances there when it comes to fundraising. But if you just want to charge a fee for the program, that's totally cool. And if anybody has a question they'd like to vocalize, it's a pretty small group, so feel free to jump off of mute or use the raise hand function of Google Meet. And Laurel, about Silk Road Dance Company on the roster. We can take a closer look at that. I was thinking you were still on it, but we could be wrong, and we can totally talk about a reapplication there just to make sure you are included.
Yeah, I was actually just looking it up, and Laurel,
Oh,
you are there. Silk Road is still listed as being a member of the touring roster, so you are absolutely still on there. But we can certainly talk about anything if you have questions. We can set up a one-on-one.
And I see another question from Wenhong. Hello. Can the organization apply multiple times in a year if the previous ones were not granted? So you can reapply, but once you get that touring grant for the fiscal year, you can only receive it once. So again, if you've applied and you were declined, you can totally reapply, even for the same engagement, or if maybe something else comes up in the meantime and you want to change your application, you can apply within the fiscal year until you get that funding. If you receive it in a former fiscal year, say you got it in FY23 or FY24, and now we're moving into the new FY25 cycle, you can apply again and get another touring grant. Hopefully that helps clarify there.
I'll just bring up Joanne's question in the chat. Is it okay for the touring artist to reach out to an organization and encourage them to apply for the grant? Absolutely. That is a great way, actually, of really, putting it out there that this is an opportunity. So if you are an artist, and you're working with different venues that you might want to encourage to apply then for that funding. What I would recommend in that case, if you're working with a venue, is let them know that, this is an opportunity, and then just share my email and Emily's email. Put us in touch with them so you don't have to worry about, talking about eligibility and all of those things. Let us deal with that. We're happy to then talk with them about the process, but for sure, encourage them, to look at that as an opportunity.
Yeah, definitely agree. A lot of our roster artists definitely are advocates for the program, and they tend to inform new presenters of the program and bring them into the loop, which is great. I see Patrick's hand. Do you want to go ahead and vocalize your question or comment?
Sure. Thank you for your wonderful presentation first. I've been talking with a few senior centers, county senior centers, about performing there. But of course, those would be during the daytime, and you gave that elementary school example that it would not be eligible because it's not open to the public because it's during the day. Would that hold true for senior centers? Or?
As long as the public could join it, then absolutely, it can happen during the daytime. It doesn't have to be, you know, an evening engagement or anything like that. What we just meant by the school scenario would be is if it was closed off to just, you know, fourth graders in a particular school, you know, that only those classes could attend. But if it's, you know, a senior center that anybody from the community would be welcome to buy tickets or, you know, attend, then absolutely that can definitely fall under this.
And do county senior centers or Baltimore City, anything like that? Are they nonprofits? I don't know.
They would fall under units of government. So yep, they would be eligible for sure. Yeah, senior centers are a great opportunity. You know, that's a really great fit for this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Great. And I see, Laurel, you have another question, comment in the chat about advising on how we can better how you can better present or reach out to presenters in Maryland, in particular, that you all are female and present Asian dance forms, in particular Islamic cultures, which is great. Yeah, this tends to be a little bit tricky because this program, the grant program, is so broad that, you know, a lot of different presenting organizations and venues can utilize this to bring artists into their facilities and venues and present to communities. So while we've in the past have had a listing of venues and different ways, it just changes so much, and because it's so broad, we have not been able to kind of connect the dots or provide a resource list, if you will. So I would just say to really think about folks in your community or venues or places that you'd like to perform at, and reach out to them directly with this opportunity and really be an advocate for the program and the roster. That's a really good starting point. I also mentioned in the chat that we do have our past grantee list. So if you'd like to get an idea of the type of venues that we are supporting or have supported in the past, just to get your the ideas rolling of what might be possible for you and your community, you know, that's a good start. Additionally, there's county arts agencies and A&E districts, arts and entertainment districts across the state. And they're really good resources for at the local level. So if you're looking to present maybe in a particular county or city or something, that's a good starting point too, and maybe build a connection there to see if they've got some resources as well. So hopefully that's a helpful start. I don't know if Laura, if you've got anything else to add to that.
I would just point out the connection that might be happening in the chat that One Hug has offered to talk with Sandy Spring, right? So that might be something, you know, I think sometimes just those organic connections happen, you know, when people are talking about what they need and what they can offer. And we're thinking about ways too that we can help facilitate some of those connections and matchmaking, if you will. So it is definitely on our radar as well.
Yeah, and the showcase that we mentioned has been pretty successful in making those connections. You know, if we are presenting a snippet of what's available from our artists and ensembles, having those presenters come to that showcase has been successful, and we know that there's been some connections made there. So like I said, we're hoping to continue that program this fall, hopefully. Okay, I think we got everything in the chat. Any other questions? Great, I'm still seeing emails being shared. This is great, perfect. All right. Well, it is 12:55. We can certainly give you about 5 minutes into your day. But like we've said, be in touch with Laura and myself if you have some specific scenarios, questions. We're here to help along the way, whether that be just making those connections or walking through the application process, providing feedback, whatever it is. Just be in touch. And really appreciate you joining today. And hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks again.